Hello, everyone. You're listening to the 805 Uncensored podcast, hosted by two leftists, recorded on Chumash land. This podcast covers a host of topics from music to politics, news, spirituality, issues both in the 805 and ones affecting the 805. There are no limits, which is why we are uncensored. So, welcome. Follow us on your podcast and social media platforms of choice. This episode, we're excited to welcome a variety of guests from all kinds of different backgrounds for another one of our panels. So let's go ahead and start with you, Heather, as always, our co host. First, I guess before we introduce everyone, um, say what your preferred name is, what you'd like to be called, your pronouns, where you're from, your political background, if you want to say, and the best way people can get a hold of you. So we'll start with you, Heather, and then I'll call on each person after that. Heather, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thanks to everyone for coming. My name is Heather Schmidt, and you can find me on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok at Heather Writes. There's three S's at the end, so Heather Writes. I go by she, her, and I'm in Ventura County, just like Jordan. And my political leanings, I think, are complicated. That's the best way to. That's the best way to say it.
Hey y'all.
Okay.
Real quick, Heather, do you mean rights as in like human rights or rights as in like an author?
As an author.
Good question. Okay, Alexis, your turn.
My name is Alexis, and she, her pronouns are fine. And I don't know. I guess my politics are somewhere to the left. And I did volunteer on a city council campaign in 2020, and I've been trying to be civically involved since then. So I really like doing that. And what was the other question?
The best way people can get a hold of you.
So my Instagram is tennis queen with 3 S's in tennis.
Awesome. Sass, your turn.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I am Sass. My pronouns are they, them. I'm currently in Eugene, Oregon. In terms of my politics, I just care about the well-being of people on the planet. I don't fret too much about trying to categorize it or label it. I've had people call me left, right, libertarian, socialist, almost everything except fascist. Fortunately, haven't had that one yet.
That's good.
Hopefully, I won't. I'm very accessible, which social media platform I'm addicted to varies at any given time. Right now, it's probably more Twitter, but I promise you, if you look for me, I'm easy to find. You can also always go to my my old campaign website, voteforsass.com. And there's a contact button there, and you can always send me something directly. But yeah, I'm easy to find. I'm easy to get a hold of.
Great. Revolution of Reason.
I guess.
Hey. You can call me Revy for short. He, him pronouns are just fine. I hail from the great land up north. And my politics are kind of an odd smattering of things that I find interesting. Guess you could broadly refer to me as a Marxist. And looking forward to getting to know you guys.
Great. Fresh Faces, New Ideas.
Yeah, I'm Fresh Faces, New Ideas. Fresh is fine. He, him pronouns. I used to stream. I do a combination of poor internet, moving, and starting as an EMT. I haven't had time to get back into it. Yeah, I'm basically a Bernie bro, and that's the best way to describe me. You can find me on Twitter at Fresher Faces New, Fresher Ideas New. I don't remember. Elon banned my last account for harassment, so I had to make a new one.
You mean calling Elon out for probably something that he did?
No, I literally have never interacted with him. I'm like 90% convinced it's a Jimmy Dore fan because I called him an idiot.
Yeah, no, you're probably right on that one too.
You probably got more likes on your tweet than him, so you got mad.
I mean, he did block my other account, so.
Paradigm, your turn.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm going to keep this short and simple. You're looking at the energy on Twitch today, and you can find me at twitch.tv/the_paradigm_shift. Please let Twitch know to give me back my username. I hate the underscores. It's about politics. It's about poetry. It's about photography. Yeah, that's right. Things that start with P. I like them. What's up? You got a problem with that? We also go into the nitty gritty about real life and how it is to be a Black American in these days and ages. And we're trying to do something even bigger and become possibly the next king of this website. So if you're down to help join with that, come hit me up on the follows. Maybe you're one of them Twitter freaks. Twitter.com/MarquisParadigm for all your hot takes and massive debates that only span 280 characters. But if you're a person that can't do it live and can't tweet in real time, you should up that YouTube. Put me on in the background while you're having love with your significant other. It's not the first time it's happened, and it's not going to be the last. Don't worry about it. I'm here for you. I'm the Paradigm Shift.
That's the greatest introduction I've ever heard in my life.
All off the top of my head.
Bravo.
I
would Paradigm Shift, all 4 syllables.
I'd actually like to keep you and I from talking for a bit, just a tiny bit, because I wanna intro us because we have history. And I want to delve on that. It's good history. It's all beautiful history. It's just funny because I did not expect to see you here. I go by he, they. Thank you for reminding me. But you can call me Paradigm for sure.
Paradigm.
Interesting. Okay. And last but certainly not least, Jezi, thank you for being here.
Sorry, I was late. I'm Jezi. I hail from Minnesota originally, but I'm in Detroit, Michigan. I'm a supportive activist, and I guess I would categorize myself in the Marxist-Leninist sphere. Yeah, that's all I got. I can't really follow that. Go on.
All right, no worries. You know what? I see one person as a guest. Are you just listening in, or are you trying to participate in the conversation? Oh, is that Jay Legacy?
Yes. Yo.
Hey, thank you for being
Sorry,
here.
I'm all late. I'm still even heading home.
Oh, no worries. So we're just doing introductions right now. So just say, I guess, what you'd like to be called, your pronouns, how you politically identify, and the best way to get a hold of you.
Okay. I'm Jay Legacy. I'm an artist. Best way to get a hold of me, probably IG or IG. Jay Legacy Official. My pronouns, him, he, and political what? Association?
Yeah, you don't have to necessarily answer
Truth?
that. Just yeah, how you politically identify, and then the best way to get a hold of you.
Truth. I politically identify for truth. So as long as you got facts to back it up, then we can talk about it. And how to get a hold of me, J Legacy Official, JLGCY Official on Instagram. If you do emails, jlegacy, jlgcy.music@gmail.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks again for jumping on. So, are you guys ready to dive into the conversation? Because I have my first question ready for Ukraine. So, whoever wants to take this one first, how do we think, after a year into this war, the Biden administration is handling the crisis? Yeah, who wants to go first?
Everybody panicking. I guess I'll go first.
Yeah, let's go, Paradigm.
So I think our war strategy is, or our.
Oh, and have everybody
like
go
the
on
US
mute when you're
has
not
a-
talking.
I feel like our government is. The simple answer is we fucking up. And it's leaving a lot of people feeling like, well, if we can spend money to go in this place, then why can't we spend it on our own people? And it's like, besides me not even diving into the nuance of just what money is, because if you don't know, and I'm going to say this just as the first hot take of the day, money is not real. It is astonishing to me that this crisis, this Russia engaged like insanity, has led people to believe that there are bad guys and good guys after we spent 100+ years fighting against the war efforts. Like, I thought we hated the machine. And I thought like Biden had given up on the machine, and like, you going down with the ship, Jack. Like, before I die, I'm giving y'all universal health care. Let's go. Let's do it. Like, I feel like the United States is playing a bigger role in this than they should, and it's affecting the populace like really, really hard. Because everybody's got an idea, everybody's got a take, why is it happening? And it's just like we should be more focused on trying to end this. And I don't mean end it like, nukes or whatever, like going full guns blazing. But like, if we're going to be involved at all, it should be towards peace. It shouldn't just be towards apathy and letting it play out and saying, we'll see what happens, and whoever dies, dies, and whoever lives, lives. Whatever. That's my take on it.
I think it's really important to like ask ourselves, like, how did we get here in the first place? And it's like, from what I can tell, it's like, oh yeah, this was like a goal. Like the U.S. and Russia have been wanting to fight a proxy war in Ukraine for a while. And it's like been the plan. And now that we're here, it's like, all right, well now there's a ton of innocent people in Ukraine who are suffering. What do we do about it? Like, there is no right answer. The best answer, of course, is like if somehow, some way we could get, if Biden would actually, do peace talks with Russia, which he refuses to do. But I also not confident that would work. Putin seems pretty dead set on, at least attempting to follow through. And so it's like, it's become this sort of impossible situation. I don't necessarily agree with, the way the Biden administration or, just the federal government as a whole has been handling it. But like, yeah, it's just like really where we're stuck at is like the leaders in US and Russia, at the core appear to want to keep this going because money, they can make a lot of money off of it. And until you fix that, it's just going to be innocent lives in Ukraine who are suffering.
I
Okay,
agree. Go ahead.
I have a different take. I think arming them is the right thing. We talk about the U.S. intervening to get peace. The peace has to come when Russian Ukrainians decide it's peace. Like when people talk about a peace deal, it's always Ukraine giving up their territory. If we want to have a peace deal, the Ukrainians should be the ones negotiating. And my understanding is that's more or less been the Biden administration's stance. I do agree with you, Paradigm Shift, this idea of like, oh, money isn't real, or why aren't we spending it on, things in America? It's like, okay, let's live in a reality where this money would go to Americans anyway, and then that would be a totally different reality. Like that reality doesn't exist. Like if we were living in that reality, it would be a different conversation. We don't live in that reality. A lot of the stuff that we're giving anyway is weapons that have already been purchased. So it's just rerouting a lot of it. I think we're doing the right thing to arm them. The Ukrainians aren't giving up. I don't think there's any risk of like a World War III, and it with the point that when it happens, we're all going to be dead. So my opinion isn't going to matter anyway. No, I'm supportive of most of what they've done. I think my biggest issue so far has been his timing to go in there and having not made it into Ohio. But I'm sure that'll come up later.
Mind if I chime in? You know what? I think one of the things that we always fail to look at on the left is the perspective of the people that are in power. And I think that there's no meaningful anti-war faction anywhere in the Western world. So let's examine this from the perspective of the people that are making the policy decisions. And if you are running the world's de facto hegemon, if you are trying to advance your nation's interests, which would be multinational corporations, your military industrial complex, I think Biden, frankly, is doing an extremely good job. And I think it's important to recognize the benefits that they're getting from running the war this way. One of the things that we don't talk about enough is the fact that Ukraine is a sacrificial lamb, or you could call them the cathode of the region. Russia has made it very blatantly clear that they have no interest in giving up Ukraine and that it's an existential threat for Ukraine to fall under Western influence. And actually, John Mersheimer has made a great point. He's a political theorist, I think, from the University of Chicago. And he said that 7 years ago, actually, I was just watching a lecture from him yesterday, that Putin would rather have Ukraine be destroyed than fall into the hands of the West. And I think what you're actively watching is that occur. And I think the West is facilitating that by arming, training, and supplying Ukraine, because it's only prolonging the conflict. If we're being realistic, Ukraine has no way of winning, but they can certainly maybe get it to a stalemate or get to a point where they have a better position at the bargaining table. But Russia has got, frankly, far more people, more firepower, more weapons, more experience. It's not going to work out well for them. You're throwing more people into the meat grinder, and the rest of the Western world gets to see Russia flex its military strategy and skill, which we haven't been able to see in a while. We can get a true assessment of post-Cold War Russia threat. And we also get to deplete their military assets, their military-aged men, and we get to have a look at how the Ukraine can defend itself, how good the United States is at funding and fighting proxy wars against a real great power, as opposed to skirmishes with insurgents like in Syria or Afghanistan. So I think from a Western perspective, this is all going smashingly. As far as a leftist, I hate it.
I think my question when my mic was off was like, do any of you think that like part of the problem also is the way that not just about like the way Biden is handling the situation in Ukraine, but the way that he's handling like the PR of it all here in the United States. Like he is losing so much support from so many different factions. I mean, you've got Republicans going after him, you've got leftists going after him. And I just saw a clip yesterday that somebody shared from Tucker Carlson of all people, but where Josh Hawley was saying, you can either be with the Democrats and globalists in Ukraine and like spinning it in that way. And so my question for you guys is like, do you think that a part of it is that Biden's failing more on messaging than he is strategy? Because that seems to be the biggest problem they have is the messaging, the administration.
Well, if we're talking messaging, then I'm going to say Biden's succeeding super well because, as I have just been reminded, BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase have already begun putting in investments into Ukraine's rebuild. So the fact that okay, now we can take this a step further. The fact that we are watching the same companies that are responsible for the Ohio incident and multiple other incidents around Texas are the same countries that have a building or growing stake in another country is just repeating the same mistakes that we keep making.
Funding
and since
Top
I feel
City.
Right, I feel like nobody can really grasp does the US want the destruction of Ukraine? Now we got to ask that. Are they just pushing the gas enough to keep the car going, but not enough to actually get them out of the ditch? I can show you the car work, but I'm not going to get it out the ditch. The fact that we even have politicians that are saying that, there's the one side and there's the globalists and there's they're turning the frogs gay. There's one side that says that, and the other side says we should just support human life and we don't want war. Is both of them meet in the equal at the military-industrial complex, and they don't even recognize that because they're so far divorced from what that middle is. Which is why I really want to agree with Rev here. It's a lot of people, and to be fair, you wouldn't hear about a war on some place and be like, I wonder what type of financial interests are put in there. But the wrong people are asking that question. The wrong people asking about financial interests. And the moment we hear Ukraine, it's about Hunter Biden. And then I'm looking at pictures of his dick again. I can see where I'm going, but I don't know where they're going. And so, yeah, that would be my answer to that. I feel like the messaging is less about what Ukraine is and more about what it could be. That's why they're doing all this fancy pantsy stuff with like the NATO posting like they're fighting Thanos and we're the Avengers and that's Voldemort and we're Harry Potter. It's like like if you are aware, you can see a little bit past it, but for like the regular person that just has to hear about it, he's keeping people sedated, and I guess that's enough.
I think I kind of disagree on this. Look, the messaging from the right, there's no reason to ever worry about it. It's going to be insanity. It's going to be like I want to be clear about like some of these things that they're talking about. Paradigm's right. Half of it is Hunter Biden's penis. Currently, I don't know how many of you are following the dumbest people on Twitter, but their current argument is the war in Ukraine is not currently real because there's no footage of it. I like this is where they're at. There's no messaging battle here. The messaging battle comes down to whose side are you on this? Because the Americans aren't pushing this. This is the Russians started this. And maybe some people have a deeper background in global history and are going to tell me that I'm wrong, whatever. This fight should continue as long as the Ukrainians are willing to continue the fight. Like if we stopped giving them weapons and they got rolled over, there's nothing to stop Russia from doing what they have done in some of these other cities where we know there's hundreds of thousands of documented war crimes. They've turned cities to rubble. We've seen the mass graves. Like these things exist. Like it's as long as these people are going to fight, we should arm them.
Fresh Faces, do you mind if I interject real quick?
Yeah,
I just read an article from the New York Post that said a U.S. former Marine, Troy Offenbecker, just described the most intense fighting since the war began, now states that frontline life expectancy has hit just 4 hours.
Are we talking about are we talking about like in total, like both sides? Because look, the fact that this battle is still going on is just a goddamn miracle in itself. Like
it's definitely a meat grinder, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I agree. It's terrible, but the meat grinder is not going to end if Americans stop sending it. It's going to turn into a one-sided slaughter. They have done an incredibly admirable job. They first, I'm sure everyone remembers those first 3 weeks where they were 5 feet outside of Kyiv, and we thought this was going to be over in a month. And they've essentially taken, my understanding is about 80 to 90% of what they lost that first week back. If the Ukrainians want this to end with some type of peace talks, they're going to be the ones who do this. And I think as long as they want our help, we should give it to them, because the other side of it is going to be Russia wiping them out. I don't understand why this is some type of really moral issue. Yes, I understand BlackRock and the capitalist ideology is bad. We can worry about that later, because the current fight here is whether or not the Russians are going to wipe this country out, as we have seen them do in places that they have already taken over. This is not a capitalism bad, all war is bad. It's I agree all war is bad, but us not stepping into this is not going to make the war not end. It's going to make the Ukrainians lose, and the Ukrainians don't want to lose. This is not like when Afghanistan collapsed in 10 minutes and their army fell apart.
Do you mind if I interject?
This is their home, and they said, we want you to help us.
I don't know if you heard the news, but ex-Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett recently reported that he engaged in early peace talks at the beginning of the conflict and was quickly dismissed by Secretary Blinken to no longer pursue peace talks as a means of brokering a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. Now, that's just purported, but that has been widely circulated on some major publications.
Yeah, there was also one that said Boris Johnson scuttled the deal too. I don't know how accurate that is, but until Russia and Ukraine are actually able to have a conversation, because I'm sure they're able to do this. Fucking Zelensky can get in and out of the country. They have the communications to do this, and they can clearly have these conversations if they want to. Until they decide to do this. And also, let's talk about ceasefires. Every single ceasefire, Russia has then bombed citizens immediately after. Until there is a consistent point where they're stopping this and we actually have proof of this, I say keep giving them the weapons. And if we want to have a discussion further down the line about rerouting some of this, yeah, let's live. I'd rather live in a world where it was this money was instead being done to build bridges or to give us universal health care or any of that. But we don't. That's not going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen under the Biden administration for universal health care. And this war is not going to end by Americans, or it's not going to end in a productive way by Americans pulling our support from the side that is being attacked.
I will say
Blicky Sanders.
super quick. I think another piece of this puzzle, though, is like you talked about supporting them, with equipment. But it's really important that we know where that equipment is going, and there's the coordination on that has not been great. And I think that's like, even if we just did that, that would be a major improvement. Because like I said, I think the central most important point is like the innocent lives of Ukraine. How do we protect them? That comes first.
And also in the mainstream media, you're not hearing about like the specifics of what equipment is being sent over all the time. A lot of times it's as simple as like a tweet out on Twitter, where the press secretary says, "Oh, we're sending another $2 billion to Ukraine," or they've clipped out like a thing from a year ago, where Biden's talking about offering pension support for Ukrainian officials that need help with their pensions or whatever. And so I think part of it is like the conversation needs to be moved more into like that it's actually, weapons, where they're going, what specifics, a little bit more transparency on that instead of just throwing out these big numbers. Because that's like from average people, like when I speak to people like here in town, right? Like your average, 50, 60-year-old woman who lives here in conservative Camarillo and watches fucking Fox News all day long, right? But is still considering herself a middle of the road or issues voter. All she's hearing on the news is, and not just from Fox, on CNN, MSNBC, etc. It's just all about dollar amounts that they're sending. And that's kind of like what I mean when I say that there's a failure of messaging. Because if I'm working for the White House, I am wanting to look for ways to make this as palatable to average Americans as possible in their little the little snippets that they get, or even like with the news articles, right? What do most Americans read when they see a news article? They read the title, right? They don't read like the whole article.
The headline.
So, and yeah, every headline is like, Biden requesting another 10 billion in aid. So most people don't realize that that's all, weapons and that type of support. They're just hearing dollar amounts. And so that's kind of like where I think of that there is a failure of messaging, but that's more a failure to message to like those middle.
But they're right to talk
the-
about the dollar figures. I mean, we've given more money to Ukraine in a year than we did in 20 years in Vietnam. I mean,
True.
that's not nothing. That needs to be talked about.
Well, we also know some of this stuff. Like there were talks about the tanks and the planes that were being sent to them, like for the past couple months. Austin went to Germany to get them to send those tanks. We know that we sent them at least in the beginning. I think it was Stinger missiles or Javelin, some type of anti-air defense. They were in talks with Israel to send them old Iron Dome stuff in order to help protect citizenry. So like this stuff is there. Like if you watch CNN, it's very obvious that some of this stuff is. Yeah, should there be some type of a documented list about every single thing that's like available to people to find? Sure. But I don't think the middle of the road American is going to know the difference between how much 60 tanks cost, or if you tell them what the cost is. I don't think that's enough of a messaging issue when the other side is out there going, this is a Russian, a Ukrainian war on Russia, or this is all because of Hunter Biden's penis, or this isn't even real, or we're arming Nazis. Like, I think that the idea like that we have to worry about what these absolute lunatics are, because that's what they are. They're fucking lunatics. On the other side are saying is a waste of breath, because it doesn't matter what he says. They're going to make some stuff up and they're going to say crazy shit either way.
That Vietnam number, is that adjusted for inflation?
Yeah, I think so, but I could pull it up for you if you want to fact check me.
Do you mind if I just sprinkle on a little bit of facts and figures real quick? Just an interesting point to maybe broach the discussion. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, sorry if I butchered that, has said weapons that are illegal for the sale in Nigeria or any of the states that are adjacent to the contiguous Nigerian border are showing up in the hands of Boko Haram and leading to conflict in the Lake Chad Basin region. He suspects the conflict in Ukraine is the blame. And the next point would be there is substantial evidence that goes from European weapon manufacturers that the weapons they're selling or the weapons they're selling and donating to Ukraine are actually ending up in the hands of Russians. Turns out there's a lot of sympathetic Ukrainians that are happy to make a buck from this. One example that I'll read is French lawyer Régis de Casino wrote on his official Twitter account, "Another success of Macron. 2 French Caesar guns were intercepted and attacked by Russians." Later, an investigation found that the 2 guns were actually sold by intermediaries from the Ukrainians who had received them from France to Russians, the price of which was $120,000 each.
Okay. But that just goes to better bookkeeping. Because, I mean, there's going to be war profiteering. Yeah, it sucks. And it's bad that we're not doing a better job of keeping this, especially that. But, I haven't heard, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I haven't heard a convincing argument of why we should just let them get steamrolled. Because that's the alternative. And yeah, there's a lot of shit on this that's not great. But
I think I'm hearing everyone. This is a familiar playbook I've heard with the idea of like using there's Nazis in there, we've got to go get them. We've seen that before. I think that the argument becomes the US involvement is bigger and has more lasting impact than like the 2 warring countries. The moment we say, yo, you're a this is the whole thing with NATO that like just bothers people. It's like, if the US says, yo, we out, like we coming to see y'all, it becomes a larger problem for everybody. Because like, and I hate to say this to anybody who is a US citizen, but like, and I am too, but like, we fucking suck. Like, we suck ass at being just morally like straight to the path. So
America, fuck yeah.
Like, I think the conversation from what I'm hearing from y'all is, while we don't want to see Ukraine get steamrolled, our involvement in it is going to throw up so many questions that like it makes it almost like a negative to be there. We might save a lot of lives and we might save an entire country from like destabilizing to the point of being burnt to rubble and watching all those people die. But like, out of that, what is the next step? The allegiances that they made through the war, right? We would assume like, all right, let's reconstruct this place. And it's like, who's going to be the first person to jump up and be like, yo, remember us? United States, because that's what we do. So we might be instigating this conflict. Like, see, now there's questions that have to be asked. Are we instigating pieces of this conflict? I think the conversation is, what are we doing over there?
Oh yeah, JP Morgan's already getting involved.
Right, like like, to your point, I agree. Yeah, the end of the game plan has to be to save these people, because human lives matter. I don't think that's the argument. I think the argument is, damn, we really put ourselves in a good position to defend everybody that's about to get steamrolled, right? And then somebody's gonna ask, wait, why is it like that? Why do we got all the weapons? What was the old meme from Lords of War? There's 1 firearm for every 12 Americans. There's a firearm for every 1 out of 12 Americans in the United States. The only question is, how do we arm the other 11? Like, why are we the mill here? Like, what can we do to avoid us becoming the propaganda wheel? Remember, we still say to this day, and this is where I'll end it because I feel like I talked for a long time. We still say to this day, it was the US that beat the Nazis. And that's not true. So like, we do have to ask, why us? Why do we have to get involved?
Just curious, if you guys couldn't tell, I'm a bit of a stickler for facts and figures here. Do we have a consensus on some of the history in Eastern Europe? Do people know the precipitating events that caused this conflict?
We're
Just-
talking about like 2014 and the Euromaidan and the
yeah,
Schengen,
the
all that stuff.
enlargement
Yeah, I
of
know
NATO
whatever
in
Dylan is
99,
talking about.
the Georgian War. Okay.
Fascist revolution.
That is a big one. I think one of the questions that we're failing to really address here, why America's in this conflict or whether America caused it, I think it's, if you look at the past history, it's undeniable that NATO has brought war to this region. Putin has to be responsible for invading Ukraine, obviously, and the deaths that have occurred, that's entirely of his own volition. But when you back a bear into a corner, they're going to bite you. And I think as any responsible person, we would ask that person, why would you back a bear into a corner? Especially if we know what their behavior is going to be. And I think that we really need to address that, the biggest thing that caused this war was the fact that NATO would not refuse Ukraine membership. And that's really the only point. I mean, even with Sevastopol in Crimea in 2015, the only reason that Crimea was invaded was simply because Ukraine decided not to honor the lease on the military land. And that's one of Russia's most important naval shipyards. So you can absolutely make claims about escalation or about whether you're retaliating in proportion, but the underlying cause of this entire conflict is whether Ukraine should be part of NATO or whether it should be a neutral buffer state to Russia.
Responses to that?
Like, all right, so my history directly with that is a little shaky. But I think the idea that NATO being the ones to provoke this is inaccurate, because a lot of the idea of NATO was to build a buffer against Russia. And NATO didn't invade Russia. Russia invaded its neighbor. Like they didn't. I look, there's more to this, and I'm not equipped with the history to make this argument. I'm not. It just.
I'd be happy to inform you. I have prepared some slides.
I'm well aware that you clearly have more of an understanding of this. From the way that I've understood this, your understanding is also it kind of just rubs me the wrong way. And there's people who I've heard who I understand this way better than me, who would have a much better conversation with you. And it's just there from what my recollection, because this was like beginning of the war type shit. This conversation was happening, and so the details would have fuzzy. But NATO being the cause of this is not. I don't think is a good enough argument.
So with respect, one thing that I always like to caution people that I engage in intellectual discussions with is when you feel as though there's intuitively something that's contradicting your opinion, although you don't have any sort of argument to support it, it could be a good reason to reflect and introspect on why those opinions are held and whether they're an opinion based on reason or whether an opinion based on acceptance or emotion. And it's always something not necessarily saying that you're inherently wrong, because I feel this way all the time, but I know that when I say something and I can't necessarily explain it, it does lead for a good opportunity to open oneself up for examination and to perhaps see it as a vulnerability in one's line of thinking, just for future reference.
I don't know. I'm just like, where do we go from here? I'm tired of all the gaslighting by the mainstream media and the administration, in the sense where if you don't support a runaway slush fund over to Ukraine, then you're somehow opposed to democracy. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive.
I'd love to hear some opinions from some of the folks that have been quiet.
Yeah, me too. Jezi, I know you've been dying to say something.
I don't have facts in front of me either. That's where I struggle, but my understanding of what's happened so far, besides all of Ukraine pretty much having to flee, is that we keep arming fascists. Like, regardless, this is not the same war that we have fought over and over for decades. This is completely different, fucking with forces that occupy important parts of Asia and Europe. And there needs to be more said about actually yeah, I'm not here for it.
I don't know, Heather, do you want to talk more about how, I guess, Biden's current messaging problem with Ukraine leads to the faux populism and ultimately neo-fascism?
Maybe. I mean, ultimately, I think that, it's very hard because very, very few, we're having these conversations about facts. First of all, how many Americans deal in facts? And I, I get it that, you've got a lot of right wing or conservative leaning, right leaning, people to deal with. They're still voting populists of this country. So like, sure, like you spend all your time, watching Fox News, right? And did you say some people think that Ukraine's war is not even real now?
That is the current stance of at least the
Yeah.
largest account I saw was Cat Turd.
Yeah.
But I know Kyle Beckler is also doing it. There's a couple of other accounts. It's
Yeah.
it's incredibly like the level of stupidity that involved for them to be making this argument is like the people who believe it really should be having help tying their shoes. Like you cannot
Yeah.
believe this.
Okay. So I totally understand, and I totally understand the craziness of it, but it still represents a fair portion of the country that we can't like I also want to like move past like the international politics like aspect of this conversation, which is like we have a lot of fucking
Yeah.
issues here in America that we need to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, and we can't just, this is the same as with like the COVID vaccines. Like we can't just say, okay, well, fuck them. Like, okay, so they don't believe in vaccines, fuck them. We're just going to move on. Like, no, that's actually not going to solve our healthcare problem. It's not going to solve COVID. It's not going to solve, like, just saying fuck them. They can just, like, whatever, they're fucking idiots and they don't like understand, or they believe conspiracy, like they live in an entire world of conspiracy. Yeah, okay, that's true, but we can't just like ignore that because they're still there whether we ignore them or not. Just like we saw with COVID. Like, okay, so there were a lot of vaccine deniers and they didn't believe the vaccines worked, or they didn't believe the vaccines were, I don't know, they thought they were implanting us with chips or whatever. Where are we now for ignoring them and just being like, all right, well, fine, you do you, fuck you. Yeah, we have like over 20 million Americans now who can't even go to work because they have long COVID. That's that's what being like, oh, okay, well, they're just living in their little conspiracy world and that's the way it is, and we're just going to keep steamrolling ahead with our own agenda. Like you can't, that still has an effect on us. And so like with respect to Ukraine, I'm not sure that like that's gonna like, I'm not sure that like ignoring those people is necessarily going to like harm us the same way like my long COVID example just did, but maybe it does, because as I see it, there are a lot of the average like middle voters who are not going to vote for Biden if he doesn't offer some solutions for Ukraine, instead of just like people that voted for Biden last time who are saying they are not going to because they're tired of it. Like they can't afford groceries, and Biden's not talking about groceries. Biden's talking about how inflation is down, or they can't work now, or they're, I mean, I know a lot of people back to COVID in the COVID community who are fucking pissed about COVID. Like they can't work now. And so like they like, I think we can both respect the need to aid Ukraine in some sense, but also expect like the Biden administration and our leaders in Congress and our Senate, like to actually start talking about what they're going to do for us too. That's not unreasonable to at least expect them to talk about it, right?
Heather, you make a really good point. Do you mind if I build on it before I lose it?
Of course.
When you spoke about alienating other workers for their different opinions, it really resonated with me. I grew up in the most conservative city imaginable. I went to a business school. I went to school for accounting. I'm certainly not the person I am now, as I was back then. And you know what? I purposely alienated myself from a lot of people with dissenting views, but I was fortunate enough to be exposed to a leftist who simply wouldn't quit on me. And they found something in me that they thought was worth keeping around. And if it wasn't for that influence, I never would have gone down the rabbit hole that I have now and had the philosophical revolutions and been in this conversation. And I think it's really important to remember that one of the things that the folks that are benefiting from us want to have is as much division as possible. Because when we're divided, we're not collaborating, we're not sharing the truth with each other. Just like these folks with COVID vaccines, much of what they had to say, much of their apprehension was correct. And I think that we were so divided and factionalized that we decided to discount the nugget of truth in their overreaction, much like how we overreacted and we had a nugget of truth as well. But if we could have come together civilly and discussed the truth that was contained within our emotional responses, we could have built the whole picture. And instead we were fighting this entire conflict with only partial deck of cards. So I think it's really important to remember that other workers, even if they disagree, are possible allies. And unity and solidarity is the baseline of all progress.
Well said. And I think this actually is a good segue into the next thing we really wanted to touch on. And I know I sent this to Jordan and I sent this to Alexis, who, if you guys are just getting here, she's my daughter. So she has to deal with all of my political rants and political memes. But I sent them this meme that I saw so many people, like Democrats, sharing. And this will segue to that topic. It was a new version of the one with the COVID vaccine, where it had the people, like, you know, with the hand, and there was the hand drowning, right? And it's like the high five, right? And with the COVID vaccine, they were sharing that, and it was like, you know, the anti-vaxxers are drowning with COVID, and you know, the blue vaccinated folks are like, yeah, fuck you, drown, right? Well, now they're sharing the same thing with East Palestine and the train derailment. And
Yeah.
it basically has the people in East Palestine are drowning.
Mhm.
And it says, like, you know, people who voted for Trump, right? And then
Joy
voted
Behar.
for Trump's deregulation. Yeah.
You see that
And
clip?
then, yeah. And then the other people are like, yeah, well, fuck you. You voted for Trump. Drown then. And it's like, like, you know, how can you justify taking that position on a community that has been entirely decimated? Like, there are Americans too. Like, okay, whatever. Some of them voted for Trump. That doesn't mean they deserve to get cancer. That doesn't mean 44,000 of their indigenous wildlife deserve to die. Like, you know, and I think that is a great turning point to our next topic, which is that Ohio train derailment and the response that we're seeing and the attitudes that we're seeing. Like, frankly, some of the attitudes I'm seeing, people just normalizing a train derailments.
Pete
You know?
Buttigieg. We have 1,000 derailments every year.
Yeah, but is that okay?
No, that's the point.
Yeah.
You're terrible at your job.
I know we're trying to
Well,
transition into the train derailment, but I do just want to add, like, at the beginning, I introduced myself as, like, I don't politically identify, and for the most part, totally in favor of people being able to be allowed to identify however they like, and if they want to share that with me, great. But I mostly ignore it. I refer to people the way they ask me to refer to them, and then otherwise I think of people as people, and that does a lot to like keep yourself grounded in like your response to different things and how you think about where people are coming from, and stay connected with like the root causes of okay, well, why did they say the things that they said? And it's like it's really important to like always be trying to drill down to the root and the cause, and the base of why they believe what they believe and why they say what they say. And if you view people as people always, that gets a lot easier to do. So, train derailment, here we come.
For the train derailment, are we talking about just the response or like what happened? Like, because the response to it, we definitely have problems. Like Pete Buttigieg, the best part about this is he's like the reason he did it is because he's McKinsey and he like kind of agrees with the way that things have happened. Like that he's on the railroad side. Like that's why his response is. Now they fucked up because none of them showed up before Trump did. That's bad optics. But I think the right optics at this point is Biden announces that because of this, there is a need for a further investment into our infrastructure and to lay out a plan for investment into our infrastructure. We can talk about, they can claim a populist position, put a bill on the table, remind them that there was a bill on this table last year, regardless of whether or not we agree the bill went far enough, which I'm sure we almost universally don't. Put the bill on the table, say, all right, we have this issue, put your money where your mouth is or shut the fuck up. Like, you want to cut the head off of their marketing argument, do it. But repeat this over, because I've seen like just the same way that Joy Behar is saying nonsense. People responding to it with other good points, like Nina Turner, who talks about this all the time. She had a thing like, you voted for Trump, you deserve to have clean air, clean water, not have train derails in your backyard. Like the messaging to this is very simple. Like the biggest problem we're going to have right now is messaging, because no bills are going to pass. It just in a divided Congress, not going to happen. So the best thing for the Biden administration to do, and again, so much political malpractice on their part, just for a whole general of reasons. But the argument they should make right now is, okay, we're going to specifically target a set of bills focused on the railroads or focused on bridges or focused on however expansive they want, and say, all right, you want us to fix this? We're going to fix this. Now put your money where your mouth is. Josh Hawley, Marjorie Taylor Greene, whichever chucklehead is saying something. If you're not going to say that, you're going to lose the point, because the only way to beat them for their populist ideology is to point out the fact that it's all fake populism. They don't give a shit about you. Like to see the idea that, oh, they have populists and they're going to help you is nonsense. The best way to talk about it is to actively push stuff. And I agree. This is the biggest issue. Point to the fact that you're going to do something about it. Let them shoot it down and keep driving that nail down their throat. In the same way they did it with cutting Medicare and Social Security, just do it on this topic and keep pushing for it. Write up a bill. I don't care. Have Bernie write it, have Elizabeth Warren write it, have fucking Ro Khanna write it. I don't give a shit who writes it. If you put a judge announcement, I don't care. Just have some plan. Like at this point, the fact that none of them have pointed this out is like, it's like basic political instincts to have it. So call them out on it. It worked with the thing. You just did it on Social Security and Medicare. Do it again.
Fresh Faces, I have a question for you. As a Canadian, I don't get an intimate look into your politics. All of the messaging that we get is that you guys are constantly in a deadlock of sort of, I don't know, partisanship struggle. Do you feel as though politicians genuinely have anyone's best interests in mind, or is it all theater?
It depends on the politician. I think there are certainly politicians who care. I do, and look, maybe someone can make this argument to me. I do not believe there are any on the right, at least on the national level, that actually give a shit about you. I think at least there may be some who are outgoing and a little cowardly about it and will do it when it doesn't affect them. But if it came down to a big decision, I don't believe they would. I think there are certainly some on the left. I don't think there's enough. But I believe that there are some. It really just depends on the politician. I think that's not just an American thing. I think that's a universal thing, that not all politicians give a shit about.
I think you're absolutely right. And a second point, just a quick follow-up. Can you point to any legislation in recent memory that you felt as though was a resounding win for the average?
Yeah, the childhood tax credit was a resounding win in the COVID, the last COVID pact. That's the one that immediately jumps out to me. Granted, every single, and this is again malpractice when I'm talking about every single Republican and Joe Manchin is pro-child poverty. This is unequivocal in that statement because they all killed it. I'm sure there's other things if I looked into, I know the IRA has a lot of like really good stuff in the middle. Part of the reason the stove thing was a really stupid topic was also because part of that bill has money for people who have gas stoves to renovate them to electric stoves. Like there's stuff in these bills that doesn't get talked about enough. So right off the bat, childhood tax credit, 30 million children raised out of poverty. Immediately 12 million of them went out when every single Republican and Joe Manchin killed it. This is not a debate. Every single Republican is pro-child poverty. They approved it over and over again. I will repeat this, and there is zero. You cannot argue with me on this. Every single Republican.
I totally can because
no, you cannot. Every single Republican senator killed that bill.
The party leaders have more power than you realize, and the ballots. We understand when we go to vote that it's important for us to have the privilege and the right to a secret ballot because we understand that we can be coerced by our family or our community into voting a certain way. The same applies to politicians. And the fact that politicians now have open ballots and that their votes are public, they are now coerced by party leaders to vote a certain way. And I think the Republican Party, maybe up until this last January, may have had just a slightly stronger hold on their politicians at the federal level than the Democrats did. And I'm willing to bet that if it was a secret ballot, there may have been at least a few Republicans, even in the U.S. Senate, who would have voted in favor of extending the child tax credit. I don't know that for sure. Obviously, we don't know because we didn't get to test it.
Okay, can I pause you real quick?
It's really important to consider how big of a difference open committees and open ballots makes in how our politicians behave and vote.
Can I push back on that real quick? That's bullshit. If you cannot vote for not bringing children out of child poverty unless it's a secret, you are in favor of child poverty. In the same way that when they said the second time they impeached Trump, if it had been a secret ballot, he would have been impeached. That just means you're in favor of what he did. If you can't stand by a position with your name on it, you do not hold that position. And I want to reiterate, the position we are talking about is whether or not children deserve to be hungry and in poverty. That's what we're talking about here. It's saying, this is not like an artificial thing. I do not care what you would have voted for if your name wasn't attached for it. Your job is to represent the people. And if you cannot put your name attached to it, you don't deserve the job to represent those people. I don't see why, congratulations. If it had been a secret ballot, would have done this, fine. The right thing to have done would have been to push this issue and save the childhood tax credit. Having a secret ballot, in theory, that could have saved it, doesn't mean that it got saved because it didn't. So by that definition, because no Republican, and granted, most of the Democrats did not do this, said that they were in favor of reauthorizing it, every single Republican is on record because they were the first time. The first time this came up for bill, every single Republican voted for it. And then when they tried to extend it, they did not allow it to happen. So I don't give a shit about your secret ballot. If you cannot put your name on a ballot to protect children from being hungry, you suck.
I think you're underestimating how powerful personal, individualized exploitation can be.
All right, then don't do that job.
Talk about all the time about how people will do things that they don't agree with, that don't align with their values because of how they're being exploited. And you have to.
If you're going to exploit me, the thing I'm going to push back on you is for children not to be hungry.
You can talk all you want about what their job is supposed to be. They're still people, and they're still vulnerable to the same kinds of exploitation that the rest of us are. And I really I suspect a lot of the Republican senators still would have voted against it, even with a secret ballot. And again, I don't know for sure, and I understand your moral argument, but when I look at the mechanics and I look at legislatures around the world and across the country and state legislatures when they have the places that have secret ballots, tend to they tend to make votes that are more in line with what the people want, or at least not even necessarily that, more level-headed, cooler heads prevail kind of votes. I mean, you can rewind a century. The 19th Amendment, that was all a bunch of male politicians who were voting against the interests of the people who voted for them. The majority of the people who voted for them were against women being able to vote, but cooler heads prevailed, and they were able to do that because they had closed committees, and they were able to do that. So really, really important to remember. Even our politicians are people, even despite how much they try to present themselves as being somehow different or elite or whatever, they're still people, and they're still subject to the same problems and psychological effects that the rest of us are.
Well, I want to follow up that with kind of looking at that same argument from kind of like the practical standpoint of, you can't have really good ethical people in government if they can't get there. Okay. And so you have someone like, say, AOC, right? And I'm not even really that big of a fan of AOC or Bernie, right? They are still going to have to make decisions when they vote with what in mind, their donors in mind. And so it is really, really hard. And I am not defending the elimination of the child tax credit, because I think that was absolute bullshit. And I think that ultimately that will be a very consequential thing for a long time, especially now that people are realizing it doing their taxes this year. But when you have the anonymity of your vote, like through a
You
secret
can respond
ballot,
when Heather's done, Jess.
when you have when you have the oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even see that you had raised your hand. I'm sorry. When you have the anonymity of a secret ballot, you don't have BlackRock or Bank of America or United Healthcare then making donations to your opponent the next day, right? If nobody knows how you're voting, that's all I'm saying. Does go on.
I guess I wanted to add from yours, because Rashida Tlaib is the Detroit rep that voted not to crush the rail strikes, along with Bernie Sanders, and it was only 3 of them. Also, what do you think is going to happen about Norfolk Southern? Do you think that they're going to vote to shield them from any repercussions? I mean, I really thought that was the topic.
Yeah, that was the topic. We had to get back to that. So thank you for doing that. I just didn't want to interrupt like that little battle that was going on. That was quite awesome.
I would like to chime in.
Yeah, go ahead.
You all have covered a couple of points that I had just finished, because I had just finished talking about this. Because my community are a bunch of nerds, and that's what they do. Class consciousness within the Ohio community that was affected by this strike, by this train derailment, is rising. There are people who voted specifically for Trump that now recognize that he should take some of the blame for this, but they're realizing that it's corporations over people, and they're seeing the real world time effects of it. To bring out another a point to that, earlier you had discussed about alienation and having the opposing sides conversation, and how could anybody justify like the worst shit imaginable happening to a group of people because of a policy that their guy put in place or didn't do. Like that one little thing is gonna in this country, there are a lot of people who will look at you directly in the eyes and say, you only cared because it happened to you. And I feel like this is a big conversation that like really starts to re-echo in this word that I've been using for the past 2 weeks now, intersectionality. While I do understand, and I wouldn't wish for a fucking train derailment and the burning of chemicals to pollute a goddamn city, town, province, a home. People's homes get blown up, and like that happens on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. People's homes get blown up, and it's not. I'm not like, yo, aha, you voted for that one DA that like helped promote this one mayor, who helped promote this one state senator, who helped promote this one governor, who helped promote this one president. Like I wouldn't expect them to realize the repercussions of local and state and federal elections and how they're all smashed together in this wonderful timeline of every single piece of chain of everything is going to fuck up. But at the same time, climate change is a factor that like reminds me of the democratic cities where they put factories in right next to towns and homes, and like that's constant everyday pollution. And then they're like, well, because the property is owned by a corporation, even though they're putting smoke up in your shit, it's not the property of like the people who make money in your neighborhood, so your schools suck. That has nothing to do with any legislation. That's got nothing to do with that.
No pun intended, but there's a reason for the saying you're on the wrong side of the tracks.
Right, yeah, right, literally, yeah. Like, so I can understand people jumping into that as a haha gotcha, because we're all at a time where I think people's like we have a better record or recollection of certain events than we've ever done before. Honestly, if I can be frank, like, and I'm not that old to be saying this, but before the internet, like the story, you had to get in a room with people to discuss this off a newspaper, or maybe like somebody printed out a newsletter, an article. Like nobody was texting full books to people like, yo, did you see this happen? And you can find out all the information. Anything that would affect big bottom dollar lines, like here we are, and oh shit, it's happening to you, but like that's where they put us. So I feel like that's where that cross section is coming from, that noise. Will I say I agree with it? Can I justify it? Of course not. Like we should all be in a point of like, but like at the same time, I live in a country where like every marginalized group is targeted. Trans people are being legislated out of existence. Like I live in a country where I gotta understand. So I the last 5 minutes of me talking absolutely moot. I can understand people having a blanket reaction to, yo, you never listened to us about anything. Now look. Because in a sense, like I just watched a dude who had a Trump 2024 hat on, understanding like that right-wing politicians don't have it for him. But he also knows that left-wing politicians don't have it for him. I want fixing. That's all I want. I want this fixed. How am I supposed to live here? Like,
hey, can I get a quick census from you folks? Everyone here is an American, right? Yeah. Okay. Let's do a little fun interactive game here. How many, show of hands, believe that the way America's political structure is set up is capable of representing the will of the people? Got 1, 2. Okay. Secondly, there's a pretty good census here. How many people here would say that functioning rail infrastructure is a fundamental need of a country? And everyone. Gotcha. Did you know that China, who has a very different system from the United States, has built 2.5 times high-speed rail infrastructure? The rest of the world has rail infrastructure combined in 15 years. And it just might lead to the conclusion that perhaps the United States isn't capable of fulfilling the will of the people. Food for thought.
Isn't capable or isn't willing to?
Yeah, because we're certainly capable of it. We just, there's a lot of other factors that are unfortunately in the way.
Not to cut you off, but I think there is something that is poignant that might be worth reflecting on. Salvador Dali, one of my favorite artists, has a famous quote where he says, "Intelligence without ambition is a bird without wings." And I think that can be applied for our situation.
I don't even think it's intelligence without ambition. I think it's a courage issue. I think it's an issue of like somebody with enough power, like standing in the gap and taking whatever's going to get thrown at them. And I think like this is one of the things that really bad with this Ohio thing is Biden has pushed himself as the union president. And his presidency has coincided with one of the largest union drives in our country's history, but partly to no fault of him. But when he had the moment to prove it, he fucked it up.
I'm very glad you brought that point up, because Biden promised a lot of things, and frankly, he sounded like he was going to be the most left-wing president ever, and I was quite excited for you guys. Now, are you guys familiar with the civil rights activist James Baldwin? Because he has a famous quote where he says, "I can't trust what you say because I see what you do." And frankly, I've heard a lot of things from American politicians, and I've never seen them fulfilled once. So when I asked earlier whether your system was capable of fulfilling the needs of the people, and you said yes, but then said that it didn't want to, want and capacity are two in the same when they're never fulfilled. So if nothing ever happens, how can you differentiate between their desire to do it and their capability to do it? And at this point, I would say, if you keep saying fool me once, shame on you, and keep going forward with that, at this point, we all have to collectively agree there is no capacity to do it. There is no desire or capability to fulfill the will of the people in that country. And I feel sorry for all of you, but I don't think rural politics are the answer to any of your problems.
Oh shit, he's okay. I like that. I'd like to respond. I know, Sass. Can I
I don't disagree.
Yeah,
that was fucking spot on.
Right. Like, okay, so I'm gonna give it to you. One way. One, I like the way you approach that. I like your style. It's like it's attentive enough where like I feel like you're not insulting me, but it's enough where I gotta pay attention to what you're saying. I like that. That keep me on my toes. That's a compliment. Most people don't have that. Most people, I swear to God, even if you wanted to be an antagonist, most people don't have that. That's a compliment. I really mean that. FDR. I'll give it to you with FDR. And when everybody, including white people, are downtrodden, then the government can kick in. Now, I know that's super fucking like, that's such a line.
It goes beyond that.
Everything you said.
When white people get affected, that's when we get change in this country. So it goes beyond what you're saying.
What kind of white people?
Affluent white people. Yeah, like I know it's a very specific
becomes affected.
Yes, right. It's a super line, but I can point to the fact that capability can lead to action if given the worst circumstances. Now, should it always be that way? Can I live under a government that's like, we're not going to do anything until nobody's got bread? Of course not. I agree with, that's why I said I like the way you phrase that. But the capability is, I think the other word that we'd have to put with capability is culpability. Who wants to be the one responsible for that? Like FDR came in and it like made sense, but then they like shot Martin Luther King. It's like, it goes in two ways, how much progression do you want? And sorry, before I do this, I want to wrap this right back in to where we started. With this Ohio situation, it's more of the same. It's more of the same. It's more of this, like, who's going to be the one to really be the face of like, while we're here, we could really change shit up. We could connect that road to that road. We could, y'all, you know what? While we rebuilding and we throwing all this money in here, why don't we do a little test pilot for like, I don't know, universal basic income? I don't know. Why don't we do a little, like, let's have fun with it. Let's give these people all opportunities and see how it works out in the community that we destroyed.
It's fine, guys. It was a controlled release.
But, yeah. 6 days.
Yeah. So my things. So on the words like, or is our politics capable? And actually, I want to break that down a little bit and say I think
We got to stay on the
as
train derailment.
I'm sorry.
We got to stay on the train
You
derailment.
could say I
so-
derailed the
Oh,
conversation.
I'm not going to stay on the train derailment, so we can come back to what I'm saying another time.
Okay. Yeah, I want to get back to that because that was a main topic. So have you guys heard that this company that's responsible for the whole disaster, Norfolk Southern, they actually hired a private group of, I don't know what you would call them, inspectors, I guess. So you have inspectors that are testing the water quality and all that work for the company. So I mean, if that doesn't say conflict of interest, I don't know what is.
So I need to sprinkle some facts on this because I was sorely disappointed as a leftist that I couldn't be as angry
Yeah.
as I wanted to be. So I was actually conducting quite a bit of primary research to try and write an article for this. I've got a few different publications I contribute to, and I was really hoping to have a great sort of slam dunk investigative journalist moment. Unfortunately, Norfolk Southern did everything they possibly could to clean up the site in the best possible manner. There's a few different chemists that I had spoke to. So the biggest thing for us to understand is that most of the chemicals on the train were hazardous, yes, but like things like propylene glycol, that's the oil that's in your vape. Every organic matter or every organic bean can break it down. There was a few other ones like ethyl acrylate and butyl acetane that were a little bit worse, but they were in such small quantities that it wasn't really an issue. It was the vinyl chloride that was the biggest problem. Now, what caused the worst optics and why, frankly, this is the only one that's gotten any sort of news play is because it made that giant plume. Now, the reason it made that plume was because there was a weather inversion in the area, which prevented winds from dispersing the smoke as quickly as they had hoped would happen. So it led to it lingering and concentrating. Now, the next reason is, well, people have said they nuked the town to get the railroads open. And unfortunately, the most appropriate way to deal with the vinyl chloride is actually a full combustion process, the byproducts of which are water and hydrochloric acid. When the hydrochloric acid vaporizes and enters the atmosphere, it bonds with the water in the clouds and creates acid rain. Now, that sounds terrible, and it is to a degree, but when the acid rain is dispersed over a large area, it's easily broken down by in the environment. Actually, the only concern in the region was the liquid vinyl chloride that had seeped into the water table. Now, this is where we might be able to have a little bit of outcry because they use what was called high pressure bifurcation. So they shoot water at a very high pressure into people's wells because they don't have time to drill wells themselves. So they confiscate anyone's wells in the area to gain access to the water table and then shoot a wall of water with a neutralizing agent that the vinyl chloride bonds to. So they prevented most of the contaminated groundwater from entering the Ohio watershed at the cost of the access to that groundwater for everyone in the region. One of the things that they're not speaking about is that nobody has a well anymore in East Palestine.
Okay, so how long does that last?
It just deals with it. So
No,
vinyl
but
chloride
like
is
how long? Because like in Hawaii, the Navy poured oil into a water well, and that's never going to be usable. Like how long are those people?
The well. From everything that I can hear, it's in a time frame that essentially makes it unfeasible for them to continue using it in this generation.
Okay, so it's fucked forever, essentially.
For the
So
most
we've gone
part,
from
yeah.
one infrastructure issue of the area to another infrastructure issue of the area, which is water.
Which is
coming
why
from
there was a
Detroit.
comment about bottled water. That was the point there.
Yeah, speaking of the high five meme, I saw one with Flint in there. So, yeah, that's an issue that still hasn't been resolved. Did you see the publicity stunt the other day from the EPA and the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, where they drank some of the water? And they were like, see,
Yeah,
it's safe.
Yeah, that's Obama fracking stuff again. That's look.
I remember when he did
we
that.
do need to point out that DeWine is not like he's openly said like I'm not asking the federal government for help, and we don't have the ability to send FEMA in without that apparently for some fucking reason.
Well, no, they can send in some FEMA. It just depends on the type of aid that you're looking for. So like some FEMA teams are able to go in, and they are. And there are other like agencies that can bypass that emergency declaration bullshit that's required. What it is that DeWine doesn't want to declare a state of emergency ultimately, because the state of emergency has been politicized with COVID. COVID states of emergency have turned all into states of emergency into like a lot of people see it as an opportunity for government overreach and for restrictions to, access to your home or your finance. There's just all kinds of conspiracy that's tied to that. And the result is that everyone is going to be hesitant to declare a state of emergency now and also be quick to roll it back. And so DeWine does not want to declare a state of emergency because he's a Republican, and the Republican base does not really appeal
We can't
to
be
that
relying on the
notion.
government.
Yeah. So there are some things that FEMA can do without that state of emergency, but it's very, very limited. And it also doesn't prevent other types of aid or speaking out and I agree with you that, whichever one of you said that it's just like they're fucking up the response. That's what I think ultimately is they're fucking up the response to it.
So
Big time.
just wanted to say that I only mentioned that simply because I think that our efforts would be most fruitful if we focused on using this as an example of the crumbling infrastructure as a whole and a means to apply solutions so we can prevent this in the future. If we do focus on the event that happened there, we're going to be sorely disappointed with the response we get, because for the most part, the acute toxicity is past. There's limited contamination of the water. People can go back to their homes. At this point, we're frankly overblowing the emergency. Like we said, like Buttigieg said, it happens 1,000 times a year, and our efforts should be focused on trying to remove the other 999 as opposed to turning this into Chernobyl.
So then I would say to you then, how fast could the American infrastructure possibly catch up to the other 999?
Great point.
Regulation first. If you maintain the brakes, that goes a long way.
Right,
yeah,
and let workers have a bigger say at the table.
Yeah.
It's not a coincidence that this disaster coincides with the labor strike crackdown by the U.S. Congress.
Yeah, like this is it. Like at this point, it's a messaging battle. Because like it's going to be probably years before we see like any of the actual damage to the people. I have no reason to disagree with Revolutions saying that they did the right way to clean it up. So whatever impacts will be later down the line, or whatever we see from people, basically tweeting up pictures of their water with rainbows in it, or whatever it looks like. So it's a messaging thing, and we've talked about this. Like the solution is you have to propose an actual message, and until they do, they're going to cede ground to people who are going to use this disingenuously. Like it's across the board. It's either, we're sending the money to Ukraine instead, or there was JD Vance on Tucker Carlson saying, why did we even bother with that infrastructure bill in the first place? The solution is a more targeted bill, or another massive one. I don't. You have to make an argument, otherwise they're going to fill the vacuum up with disingenuous stuff.
We could really look towards the rail unions that were warning us about this for decades prior, about the strikes that were shot down around Christmas time. We could talk about the crumbling infrastructure bills that didn't pass, like the Build Back Better bill that allocated hundreds of billions of dollars to America's crumbling infrastructure and was shot down. I think that this is a multi-pronged issue, and it needs the coalescence of all of them to come together before we can form a meaningful response to this in the future.
And I think ultimately this gets back to that criticism of the Democratic Party, is that we can't, or the Democratic Party, especially the old guard Democratic Party, the Biden, Chuck Schumer, the really old guard, they cannot
Blue
walk and chew
dogs.
gum at the same. Yeah, they cannot walk and chew gum at the same time. They cannot handle more than one issue at a time. And right now their issue is rallying support for Ukraine and continuing to invest in that effort. And then also to hammer home their ongoing message about the economy that I don't know that is entirely
I'll be
rooted
right
in
back, by the
fact,
way.
but right.
So if we're going to talk about the economy, it seems like to Americans, the number one motivating factor is always profit, right? So when I try to speak reason to arch conservatives, it always comes around to what's better for the bottom line. And it's often the most unintuitive answer. We're worried about quarterly earnings calls and not profits 10 years down the road. And I can tell you as a business professional myself, it's very difficult to communicate that to upper management. But the biggest payoffs in my career have been the ones that took many years to unfold, because it makes you seem like a genius, but all it really takes is just the most baseline reason that anyone else would apply to their own life, like planning 5 years down the road and not being worried about election cycles or share prices. So if we were to say, hey, the cost of these derailments are going to continue to hurt the bottom line, and in fact, they're going to outweigh the price of the lawsuits that follow, or sorry, the lawsuits and these derailments is going to weigh more than actually outfitting the infrastructure with new rails, then we can make a very solid argument. You guys are probably all familiar with the Ford Pinto fiasco, where they did the calculation and just settling the lawsuits on the dead bodies was cheaper than redesigning the car. So we have to change the cost benefit calculation to change the logic in these companies. And I'm a Marxist. I hate corporations, but I can tell you firsthand as a person that spends lots of time with upper management, these people aren't evil. They think of themselves as good people, but they're constrained by a system that influences their behavior in very specific respects. So what we need to do is adjust the variables that change their cost benefit decision. And the biggest variable that we have control of as constituents would be the legislative repercussions for failing to meet these safety standards. Right now, the penalties for these are the fines in the millions, single digits. That's nothing consequential to a company that makes $13 billion a quarter. What we need to do is organize to do direct action to bring attention to the government that a very specific lever they can pull is to increase the monetary fines on safety violations and on any sort of infringement that would cause these derailments. Then the calculus for the people assessing risk at these companies would change their appetite for that risk and perhaps start outfitting their trains preventatively in order to maximize the bottom line. It's all equations.
No, I agree with you. You're right on, pushing that. The problem is when you advocate for something, like if we're going to talk about a cost balance in the thing. Medicare for all is a perfect example. They say, oh, it's going to cost $32 trillion or whatever the number is over X amount of time. Okay, the current system costs $2 to $4 trillion more.
It's vastly more expensive. It's not even close.
Yeah, like I know the Koch brothers study, which is the one I usually cite, said that Medicare for all would save $2 trillion over like a 10-year span. Like it's a lot harder. Like, yes, on its face, it should be easier to say, hey, look, if you make it more expensive now, you'll make more profit in the end. But like you got to remember, and this is a very difficult thing to say. Americans are stupid, and we're really easily scared by things like, ooh, government regulation is socialism, because socialism is when the government does stuff, and the more the government does stuff, the more socialism we get. And trying to figure out how to say that to like corporations or something is different. So I don't know how the average person is going to be able to do that, because you have to compete with both those corporations and then whatever news media that's going to push back against these ideas, and whatever politician they have purchased to say this. And this is why originally when you asked about do you think the system has the capability? I said yes, because I think if there was actually somebody who stood up and said, fuck it, I don't care if you call me a socialist or whatever nonsense you're going to say about my career, and I'll probably end their career. These are the things I'm going to fight for. And this is how we push for it. And that's where I think the difference. I think that the system has the capability for it. It's missing the person to pull the levers.
I mean, the problem, this gets back to our elections, right?
Let's go into that topic, Heather. Let's go into election 2024.
Yeah, because I mean, the only way that you can elevate those people to positions of power that are high enough that they can make those votes or make that change or affect that policy is if they're able to be elected. And American elections are so expensive. There's so many problems between the fact that anyone from outside the two-party system has virtually no chance unless they have a huge donor base or personal wealth, that they can invest. Like I think Ralph Nader invested a lot in his own campaign. And then you just have the way that we vote, right? With the two, we don't have ranked choice voting
Fucking
in
two-party system.
yeah, it's just bullshit. And it's so hard to even have these conversations and think like, oh yeah, we just need the people that are willing to like stand up for what's right? Like stand up for child tax credit or stand up for like changing in regulations of the railway or, improving infrastructure, like voting on these issues. Because like the chances of them getting elected are so slim and none. We have Sass was a candidate. I was a candidate. I
Yeah,
think
he wants to speak,
wasn't
by the way.
Paradigm. Yeah, wasn't Paradigm a candidate?
I don't know. He's not here.
I
Sass wants
think
to
he
speak, though.
was. Yeah, and I want to hear what Sass has to say about this because it's like it's once you're a candidate, it's totally different.
So, it just first and foremost, right now it costs about $1 million to win a campaign for U.S. House. Parties have a lot of control. But first and foremost, I just want to say, right now, this is my profession, right? So I am the operations coordinator and a board director for the Equal Vote Coalition. We advocate for true equality in the vote itself through actual initiatives and reforms. And that we've been using this system, this choose one voting system, for about 2.5 centuries now, and it just mechanically locks us into this two-party system because it's only stable in that way. It's really, really important to know that ranked choice voting also does the same thing. It has the same mechanical problems as choose one voting. But there are other alternative voting methods like star voting, like approval voting, like ranked robin, like so many others that do level the playing field and elect candidates who actually build consensus across the electorate. And that is fundamentally the most important factor that we can actually change, that will dramatically affect our politics, that will reduce the influence of money in politics, is actually that's the biggest thing that we could do to reduce the influence of money in politics. So right now, under our current system, because you're only able to support one candidate on your ballot and it's so limited, you have to put all of your vote only toward a candidate who actually has a chance of winning if you want your vote to actually make a difference. So that creates a huge electability bias, and electability is defined by things like incumbency. It's defined by things like how much money you have. It's defined by things like name recognition, right? So, but if you're able to actually support multiple candidates at the same time, then you can start to see real support for other candidates who maybe don't have all of those things, and you reduce that electability bias. So, changing our voting method to something that's significantly better, such as approval voting or star voting, would go a very long way in addressing a lot of this stuff and making our politicians much more responsive to the people. So I can talk more and more about that. I can talk about that forever, but
I totally agree. I think there's also a media aspect to this as well. I mean, independent media is rising, no doubt about it, but still in 2023, the mainstream media still has far too much power. So they can kind of just exile any leftist candidate, any candidate that'd be legitimately anti-capitalist in any aspect. And we saw that with Bernie Sanders in 2 elections now, 2016 and 2020.
Yeah, it's interesting with Bernie Sanders. In 2016, it was more party control that killed him. And then in 2020, party control absolutely played a role, but also vote splitting played a role because there were multiple candidates who were seen as more Bernie adjacent, whereas, including particularly Elizabeth Warren, whereas Biden was the quote unquote more moderate. And yes, of course, the media lied to everybody and said that he had the best chance of beating Trump, which was just objectively false. And all of the polling disagreed with that. So the media is a big piece of it, but you also have to remember that the media is in bed with a lot of people who are currently in power. And if you can start to break that mold and start to get better people in power, even if it's just starting at the local level and then getting at the state level. You can start to break through that, and you can start to fix that media thing. And there are other things we can do with like legislation, but of course, it starts with getting the right people in power as well. So it's a tough problem to solve. If it was easy, it would have already been done. But this is, I think, a really important thing that we actually can do that actually will make a real significant difference.
Sass, I have a question for you. Do you see us ever actually making progress in this country, though, while we're still under the two-party system?
No, we've hit a wall, and we have to get through that piece of it. And eliminating vote splitting is, I think there are two big things: eliminating vote splitting, which is just a mechanic that some voting methods have and most don't, as well as the way that we do legislation in legislatures, whether we're talking about state or federal, which is voting up or down on a single piece of legislation. A much better way to do it would be to have a single issue, and there are multiple different proposals for different pieces of legislation to try to solve that issue, and then all those legislators would vote on all of those different proposals all at once, using a better voting method like star voting. And then you actually get a more consensus proposal that actually pushes its way forward and can get a more broad consensus support. And so those two things, vote splitting and people electing politicians, and then the way that we push legislation forward, or legislative process, those two things I think are the most powerful factors in what entrenches our two-party system. And so if we can get people into power, into those positions with better voting methods, and then they understand that, and then hopefully eventually someday, I don't know when, I have no timeline, they can then adjust the legislative process, because it's all just rules that the legislators themselves can change. If you can get those two things, you're going to break the two biggest factors that are locking us into the two-party system.
Has anyone ever read Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky? Okay. Just for a basic overview, essentially says that you can inculcate an idea inside of anyone just through repetition, right? So one of the things that's anecdotal, but I certainly believe in it, is I've had the great fortune of traveling all around your country. I do quite a bit of business, especially in Texas, and I can say that I have almost, I think without exception, never met a politically literate American. There has been a great deal of effort by your ruling class to ensure that most people believe they have an adequate understanding of politics, when it is frankly a veneer, much like how a history teacher would make you memorize dates and not the reason why the events on those dates occurred and what their implications were. The rest of the world looks at Americans as an electorate that elects stupid people. And there's a great quote that says, if you elect stupid people, the only reflection is that the electorate must be stupid themselves. Now, I fundamentally disagree that anyone is stupid, but I certainly think you can be propagandized, and I think you can be misinformed. And the thing that I think is dangerous about democracy, and especially a republic like yourselves, is that you are conditioned to get all of your information about candidates from the media, which is controlled by corporate interests, which obviously directly contradict your own interests, right? But let's put that aside. And let's say that your politicians were a direct reflection of the will of the people, and they got into office. And let's not even focus on lobbying and the people that get to spend all their time in the politician's office. What interest do they have in actually representing your will if it doesn't get them reelected? And I think the biggest thing here is that if we put too much faith into politicians, we take too much faith and power and agency out of ourselves. And we have to remember that these people are merely vehicles to enact our will. They are not our will. And I think America as a whole has fallen into, they've been lulled into a sense of security to believe as though politicians are some omnipotent, all-knowing being that is somehow more informed, more educated, more intelligent, makes better decisions on their behalf, and they are the experts that should be consulted in decision-making matters, when frankly, they are just a matter of convenience in a time before we had cell phones and the capability to do direct democracy. I think that America, what was really spectacular about the American experiment is that it was founded on revolution. It was founded by rebels. It was founded by individuals who felt as though their voices had to be heard. And what I don't see anymore in this country is anyone that feels as though they have any agency over the decision making. And I think what's sad about that is it takes so little people to come together to make a big enough stand to scare the people in power into enacting the will of the people, which is why I'm a fan of direct action. For example, people like in, let's say, Quebec, First Nations people blockading rail lines. We don't have a pipeline that runs from Alberta to Quebec to transport oil. And we also terrorize our Indigenous people. And after being tired of the torture that we were exposing them to, decided to block the rail lines that bring oil to Quebec, a province of 18 million people, and one of the economic engines of the country. And within about 21 days, they got all of their requests. There was no concessions given, and they were given complete sovereignty and autonomy to rule over their area. Now, it only took a group of about 300 people who were well armed and were very, very certain of themselves in the eyes of the public to get this done. And I don't think that any politician ever, if given the ability to choose whether they would do it, would have done that. But nobody was angry at them. If anything, they are heroes in Canadian society. And I think that America needs to look more to that, not necessarily on the violent side of things. That was just for self-protection. But let's say if you wanted to increase the fines for train derailments, so the next political candidate you can vote in can do the same thing and screw you guys over and ignore your requests. Instead of doing that, how about like a small group of people blockade some rail lines, cause enough of a stir that they can get some media attention to bring some well-needed focus to the issue. And those propagandized folks that are listening for their opinions from the media and maybe aren't politically literate, for the first time in their life, can hear someone like ourselves speaking the truth on mainstream news, having their demands be heard on a major platform. Maybe that will talk some sense into them and get them to push the politicians to do what is right.
Are you saying we need more class consciousness in the U.S.? Am I crazy?
I would like to chime in here.
In a very roundabout way,
I
yes.
would too.
Okay. So this is, yay, we're back again at the word intersectionality. See, I don't bring this up as a reason in a conversation because it should be understood by like looking at me that I kind of get that. You feel me? Like, I'm not the one who would say, yo, this candidate's going to, I ran for mayor of New York City. And like to this day, people still say to me, yo, I wish you would have ran because Eric Adams is a bum and da-da-da this and da-da-da that. And I'm like, yeah, sure. But then I think about what Sass said and the outside influence of like the outside influence of every benefactor around you that you trust to have in a circle with you that is supposed to like, you know, protect you and not let you sink in the case of like a big scandal of some sort or you fucked up somewhere. You know, you got a circle of people you can trust. I'm one of those people that would get a position of power and be like, all right, so yeah. Until y'all fix this thing you got going on with the I'm just gonna look the other way when you call me for help when people start blockading your state lines and all your truckers start like when that starts happening, don't come to me for support. You know, I'm one of them people. I do believe in direct action, but I want to say, not to counter it, to add on to it in the intersectional way. I think the reason why most people don't go this direction and still believe in the electorate is because they see the electorate as the people who already have the media attention, who will say the things that they hope they will say. Yes, this is a theory on why we literally had somebody else in office from 2016 to 2020 who we will not mention. But the splitting of hairs on how we push forward as a society, and I really mean this for just Americans, would require such a tragic, like, you think 9/11 would have been it, but like it wasn't, and for reasons I'm not going to go into.
No, we went the other way. We have far too many people that are just drunk on American exceptionalism.
Right, exactly. Like you would, because it was our foreign policy. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Sticking on topic. when it comes to Americans, I feel like we've gotten used to and I've said this before, and this is why I do my Twitch streams the way I do them. We've gotten used to the hero. We've gotten used to the hero in our lives, in our daily, people of authority are going to be your heroes. It'll never be your childhood friend who saves you from getting hit by a car. Yeah, he did something heroic, but those aren't my heroes. Kobe Bryant's my hero. I have heroes. And when you realize nobody's there for you, it makes you feel like your direct action, and I really mean this for this country. For the majority of people, they feel like it's wasted effort because if somebody else cared, they would have done it by now. They don't know the Black Panther Party.
Jezi, bottom
they don't
left,
know,
or bottom of the screen.
They don't know they don't know the Black Panther Party. They don't know Stonewall. They don't know the history of their own country within it. So, and I want to be so funny with this just to make you see I was listening. You said, do we have the capability? Does the government have the capability, or what? Like, what is the issue here? I think it's that people who are elected aren't these revolutionaries. We don't elect social change. We want the social leaders to affect the politicians to make the change. But if they already doing it, why are we spending our time with, and this is not to say please don't vote. That's definitely not a thing. Got to play within a system or else it all comes crumbling down and then we're not anywhere near where we need to be prepared to be on our own. We can't even figure out
we can walk and chew gum. We can advocate for more voting and we can advocate for more direct action.
Right, exactly. But I would go in if we don't get it now, I'm kind of not, I wouldn't say I really think this way, but it's just the last thought I had because that's where y'all took the conversation. It's not like I want this shit to happen now, but I'm kind of at a point where it's when, if not now, you feel me? You just watched a plume of smoke go up and you're going to vote for that to not happen. It's
right.
If you didn't let the train in, maybe, I'm just saying.
I mean, perhaps I was partially delusional, but I thought we were going to have some sort of revolution during the George Floyd murder.
I was about to bring that up.
Yeah, but I gotta get to Sass real quick. Then I'll get back to you. Fresh ideas.
Just two super quick things. Number one, the amount of turnout is irrelevant in scaled elections. What matters is who is turning out. And that demographic, that political demographic, is representative of the electorate. So that's what matters. It matters who turns out, not how many people do. The second thing, and I posted this in our chat, is that over the last few years, direct action has achieved surprisingly little across the country. The media has gotten really good at either spinning or ignoring direct action, and that's a huge problem. And I suspect that Fresh is about to talk about that.
Yeah, so I got a positive and a negative. I'm going to go with the negative first. I know you're Canadian, but there was this big thing that happened when George Floyd died. It was essentially the largest civil rights movement in this country, basically since the civil rights movement. And we didn't get shit. At all. So the idea that direct action works in some places, yeah. The thing is, if we tried stopping trains, they would just I know this is going to be the wrong way that they're going to run people the fuck over. That's not an exaggeration. They passed that law in Florida. If you protest, they will run you the fuck over. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. The good news, we have guns. If we start getting into a shootout, we're going to lose everything. No, it's not.
Obviously, I'm not advocating for the death of American citizens. However, if you look at the history of our country, any time that we've actually had any advancements for the working class and the poor, people have been willing to die for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. But there has to be, and this is why I think we also have to work within the system. I think there's a shift coming, assuming we make it through 24. We saw it in the. And look, I know this is bad. the number of young people who turned out in 22 to the impact that they made. The reason that we lost the House is essentially because of Andrew Cuomo. He fucked up New York, and Kathy Hochul is terrible, and they fucked up New York, and that's essentially where we lost the House. The young people are only going to come out more. And the difference is it's not people who are seeing this energy and pushing for things. We're going to see a lot of things being pushed to stop them from voting. We saw people tweeting out that, we want to raise the age of voting, or not letting people vote after they move from a blue state to a red state. That's where their fear is for the younger people. And I think if we have a wave similar to last year, without the plethora of fuck-ups that Biden kind of had no control over, and coinciding that with the utter clown show that is going to be the Republican House, I think it does bode for a possibility of a party that can actually do things. And now, yes, I know that's a long shot, but I think actually advocating for things would help, and combining the push for new candidates in the system to break the system as it currently is. And I know it's hard, and I think there is a shift happening. Is it happening fast enough? No. Should it have happened a long time ago? Yeah. But I think there's a shift happening of generational change that is going to be a whiplash, because I think it's only going to take one election. Honestly, in either direction. It's going to take one election where one side gets enough power to actually substantially change things. I think if we get a large enough margin, if we're talking like a 52, 53 Senate margin, and more the similar in just the House in general, I think we have the ability to do substantial change in either direction. And that's why I say 24 is the tipping point, because if it tips right, I don't really know how much of democracy is going to matter anymore.
So I've been really trying to shy away from my more leftist views. I'm a hardcore Marxist, and I always try to temper that. So I try my best not to be a doomer, especially in circles like this with a bunch of enlightened and engaging folks that can really do great things through the current electorate system. I don't mean to disparage you. I love Americans, but I made that comment earlier about folks being propagandized and being politically illiterate, because I feel like it needs to be said to more folks. Unfortunately, America has the best propaganda system in the world. Oh, sorry, you call it media. And it needs to be really underscored that the rest of the world looks at America through a very different lens than you can see yourself. Consider it two-way glass. And I want to do this in a way that's beneficial to you folks, but nobody thinks that there's going to be anything good that comes out of your country. Nobody. And we're all very afraid for ourselves because of it. Now, I don't know about you, but I am a very big student of history. And I study republics when they turn to empires, and then empires when they overspend and extend themselves militarily, and then everything goes great. Oh, wait, no, I don't, because that never happens. The thing that's happening in America right now is it's a consequence of late stage capitalism.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say.
It is falling profit theory in action. You guys have outsourced all of your labor. You don't have a real economy, all right? It's entirely based on service. 70% of your GDP is based on consumer spending. You guys are the most indebted per capita of anywhere in the world. People have run out of funds. Inflation is running amok. You've got people that can barely afford the cost of living. There are no more countries that you can outsource your labor to for cheaper. All the countries you have used that incoming wealth to nationalize it and redistribute it and invest it in a way that makes them impervious to your imperial designs. The rest of the world is insulating themselves from being dependent on America. And you can see that if you look at a graph of trade relations. Almost the entire world is now in bed with China because they have the only real economy out of any great power. They are the world's workshop. And when it comes down to it, pushing money between bank accounts does not create value. And if you subscribe to the labor theory of value, which I think most leftists do, there is no value in America. America runs what we call a rentier capitalist economy, where they own things and collect rent. And the only reason they own things is because they have such a big military that nobody can challenge them. The majority of the world's debt is in US dollars. The US can run up its debt indefinitely because it's in its own dollars. It never has to pay it back. But every other country in the world has to pay back their debts in US dollars. So when the the IMF comes and intervenes and applies austerity measures, they can tell them what to import, what to export, and to be more dependent on the dwindling amount of manufacturing that is left in this country. Now, why I say that is because it prefaces what's about to happen in the 2024 election. There is no other way for this to go other than fascism. Biden is Weekend at Bernie's. It is fucking hilarious that anyone in this country actually thinks that that man is even conscious off camera. I can't believe grown adults really think that he is a decision maker. If anything, this should have been a radicalizing wake-up call to show just how little power elected officials actually have. What's going to happen in 2024 is a landslide shift back to the right, and it's going to either happen between Trump or DeSantis. And I only say that because Trump is at ends with DeSantis, but after this show in Ohio, Trump is a better president than the sitting president. And I frankly think that he can ride the momentum from his previous presidency to take this. And I think that DeSantis is smart and he won't challenge Trump. And I think that he'll put himself in line to be the successor. And what that means is if you've been following the rhetoric from the right, if you've been following the rhetoric from Trump, they are going to enact the most marginalizing policies in American history. They are turning trans people into the Jews. They are going to eradicate them. They are going to scapegoat them. They are going to find a means of increasing the nationality to wage further wars. They are going to find a way to further individualize and alienate people. They are going to use that suffering from that alienation, from that sense of responsibility for one's own situation, to then say there's a problem with the culture and the culture needs to be changed and that we need to oppress women and return to patriarchy and that we need to go back to a family unit and that we've lost our Christian values. It is the inception of fascism. Joseph Stanley has a great book where he writes about what is fascism, and America is fascism. There is no other better example of it in the world. You are living in 1930s Weimar Germany, and if you are not perceptive enough to see it,
We literally
you will be
inspired
wearing
Nazi
an SS
Germany.
badge.
You know, I just we want to get Jezi to say,
Assimilated.
we want to make sure that she has the next point. But I wanted to also get everybody's take on this because Revolution of Reason is not in the United States. And I have family in Australia, and I'm sure everybody at this table knows people not in the United States. And what I'd like to know is how the fuck many people from outside of the United States have to say some version of what Revolution just said before we listen. Like everyone that I know here in America acts like we know better, or they say you just don't understand, or you talk to local politicians about this and it's like you just don't understand how it works, or you talk about it on Twitter and people are like, oh, you just don't understand, you don't understand. Why are we not listening to people in Australia that are like, what? Like, I have family in Australia that email me and ask, like, do you need a place to come to? Because we can let you come to Australia and live with us, because that's how bad the outside looks at us. And Revolution is straight up telling us from the Canadian perspective what is going on. But how many of us or people that we know are just go about and pretend like, oh, well, they don't really know. That's not really what's going on.
You know, I'm gonna tell you the real reason. If we're really going here, look, I've been on both sides of this coin. I've tried to be a politician, I've tried to be a revolutionary, I ended up just being me. The reason why most people don't see this shit is because it's either that or death for them. And that myriad of thinking, how can I both be in the greatest country in the world and only have these two choices, puts people in a cataclysmic state. They think they have to give up everything in order to get what they truly want, which is a good night's sleep. This is not entirely false, but it's not entirely true. And a lot of people just don't have that, like, they don't have the capacity to think it would take 2 weeks. They don't think the infrastructure is there for it to take 2 weeks. And this is where I'm going to do the worst thing ever. And that's why I was afraid to answer this, because, like, I completely agree with Revolution, and it sucks that, like, it has to be said the way that it's being said, because a lot of people would take that antagonistically. But like, marginalized groups keep saying that shit to you all the time. Like, yo, black people didn't want to take the vaccine because they were reminded of Tuskegee, and like, hey, I've heard all this and the propaganda and that and this. You gotta believe MK Ultra was real. You gotta believe COINTELPRO was real. Like, we got the facts. We got the. Why would you ever trust them? And it's like, here we go again with you only care because it happens to you. I think that we are in that train of nobody spoke up for me. And it's been going on so long that we built the country on nobody spoke for me. You'll hear like Republicans say, oh, Europeans did more to end slavery even. And it's like, the 13th Amendment didn't help anything for like the next till now. Like, whoa.
Yeah, and we still obviously have slavery in this country. It's just evolved.
Yeah, it's just evolved. And to me, it's this never-ending risk of everybody's afraid that somebody else got to do it. Somebody else got to do it. I can't be the one to do it because I got 2 kids, and like, I would love to fight the cause with you and stay out for 5 hours, but like, I got to make sure dinner's on the stove. And it's like, we don't have the type of community effort where we could be like, all right, all the parents are going out. We got to have a place for the kids. We got to
talking about mutual aid.
Right. Yeah. We don't have these structures because, again, somebody else got to do it. I see a free library. I'm worried about one person stealing all the books and then reselling them back. It's like, people don't even read books. Just have the library out there for the kids. But we defund our libraries. We defund our education. We defund our infrastructure. But we got, you know what we have? And you know why we're the greatest country in the world? Because we got something that none of you have, especially you losers in Canada. We have, you know what? Nothing I say could ever like hit the
Super Bowl.
So we're just going to drop. Yeah, there we go. Super Bowl. We got the Super Bowl.
Hey,
what do you got? The Canadian Football League, the CFL?
They do fucking suck. They're terrible. You guys do have that. You got good football. Yo, Waco Stadium. I drove past that. That was like a high school stadium, bigger than our professional ones. Mega churches are great too, except for all that stealing. Anyway, hey, Paradigm, listen, I hope this isn't inappropriate. I don't want to paint you as a monolith, but I am very curious. As an African-American man, can you maybe elucidate some insight as to the de-radicalization of African Americans? Like, I can tell you firsthand, as a person that aspires to be a revolutionary, my heroes are people like Angela Davis, Huey P. Newton, Fred Hampton, Fannie Lou Hamper, Malcolm X. Like, these are the people that really did it. Like, if I look to contemporary Marxists, if I could look to people that actually put their money where their mouth is, people that I think are my heroes, it's all Black men, all Black women. So have you noticed yourself in your own experiences, has there been a shift in African-American culture? I don't see that through line anymore that's being popularized. And maybe you spoke to it there correctly, that it's not me, or, if I don't speak up, nobody else will, sort of thing, right?
It's less of that, and it's more that right now, as it's more now of us understanding there's a lot more mutual aid than I think is popularized. I think there's a greater movement that I think we still kind of live in that era where we want to be the ones to relax because we've always been the ones fighting. And it shows out more in the way mainstream media popularizes us. There's just a thing that I was about to talk about now about a TikTok star who started going in the King Botch direction and doing the watermelon joke and doing the fried chicken joke. And it's like, yeah, but how many generations are we going to keep that up before that's just not funny anymore? And he's gotten canceled or whatever. I don't care. That's not the point of this. But at the same time, we have plenty of Black voices, especially on Twitch, that I've been surprised to find that do engage in mutual aid, do have big followings. But and this is a whole conversation that we've had for a very long time, the development of the algorithm and how it recommends content to people. What type of conversations do you see? And this is another thing where you had brought up, the most propagandized state. It's like, we want to keep you watching. If something gets you off your ass and says, I'm going to the voting booth for 3 hours, that's not good for our bottom line. So we're not going to show you that. It's a thing that we legitimately deal with. I feel like a lot of us are just stuck right now in understanding, do we really have the position that we've always had in life? I thought things got better. But as we start talking to more people, as culture starts mixing, especially due to the internet, we end up finding out the bigger and greater reality. So that current split is between just understanding where we belong in the conversation, because it's like, I thought I'll hear from other people around in my neighborhood. I thought like we had already solved that with like the civil rights movement. I thought, these things were kind of done. And it's like, it's very hard for me to press to them. There's a reason why when you go to your job, you see people like you, and it's not because people like that look like you want to apply for those jobs. It's those are the jobs that they can get. And that like stuns people sometimes to hear that. But it's like, I had to come to grips with that because I used to understand why like white leadership would always lead to like gossip, and there was always issues, and there was always these microaggressions and all these little things that like I would be said to in my face that made me feel like a certain type of way. I've always told people I never got the chance to be a right winger. I never got the chance to understand what it felt like to like have power. I never got to feel like making fun of somebody because they come from Africa was like the right thing to do. I never said, hey, yo, that's mad gay. Like I never, like I might have maybe in like chat rooms when I was like 10, but I never wanted to make someone in their face feel like a less than like who they were, because that's how I was always looked at. And I still pay attention to that to this day. So that would be my answer to that.
Just to piggyback on that, this goes to everyone. I am so overwhelmingly curious with the amount of Latinos that vote for Trump and the first generation immigrants that have now internalized sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, the patriotism. But as a foreigner, I really can't understand that, because obviously the predominant majority in the country is German and British. Why
my
are there
understanding
so many hyper-nationalists?
my understanding in speaking with Latinos that are more conservative is that they kind of have a sense of, well, I came here legally, so why can't they do it?
I also think that Donald Trump. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Literally, it's literally that and the fear of socialism. That's what pushes a lot of it. Like the idea, especially like those from like Venezuela and that.
In Florida, they heavily are, they push anti-Cuban rhetoric.
I also think that people really underestimate. Oh, sorry. I think I'm breaking. Am I breaking up?
I can hear you.
Because you guys are breaking up. So I feel like I'm interrupting.
And then after you, Heather, Sass wants to say something.
I was just going to say, I think that people really underestimate the number of people that identify with Donald Trump, because even like for all the photographs of him with his gold toilets and gold curtains and gold, gilded rooms and private jets, he also goes to McDonald's, like in back to East Palestine. He went to McDonald's and he bought everybody hamburgers and fries. And it's like a lot of people just identify with him on that level. And he is more human to them than some guy, like you said, Weekend at Bernie's, propped up in the White House, who's taken 40% of his presidency off. They just, whether it's right or not, I'm not saying it's right. They identify with them. Sass?
Yeah, so two things. Number one, really, really important to keep in mind, Trump picked up 10 million votes from 2016 to 2020. This is a really, really important thing that some people tend to forget or not realize. But also, I lived in Austin, Texas for 3 years, and most of my neighbors did not speak English, but I was able to, my Spanish ain't super fluent, but they come here to work. They come here to put in the hours and to earn a living, to take care of their family. And that kind of like physical labor, core family value is not something that we see reflected in our quote unquote progressive candidates. And Trump, that's not the only stuff Trump talks about, but that's the stuff that's the most important to them. And Trump speaks to it more than some of the other candidates who we look at, particularly the high-profile Democrats, and so kind of on that same page of resonating. I think that Revy is I think the answer to your question.
Follow up: what would you like to see out of a Democratic candidate that you think could recapture those votes?
It's hard because it's there's a disagreement in core value of the anti-work crowd versus, it's like, yeah, if I could sit down and have if I could form a one-on-one relationship with each of these people and help them understand my philosophy about unnecessary labor and bullshit jobs and in the age of abundance and guaranteeing people's right to life and everything, maybe I could convince them, but that's one candidate can't do that. One presidential candidate can't do that with 10 or 20 million voters. They can't have those one-on-one conversations. And so, I'm not a huge fan of Democrats or whatever, but if a Democrat wanted to recapture that vote, there would, and I think Greg Casar did this. He ended up taking the seat I was going for, of just focusing on making it so that the jobs are available and stable. Maybe more of I don't even know how to frame it best. I haven't thought about it much.
Okay, what would you say is the biggest detractor from the Democratic Party in the United States right now? What do you think is the most out of sync, out of the times, the biggest thing holding them back that they still are married to in their branding?
Poor propaganda. Literally, they do not have a propaganda outlet in the same way that the right has, in order to distill a top-down message, in order to advocate to the most amount of people. You can find the same thing. It's literally, you can find the same stupid-ass shit from Catford as on Tucker Carlson.
Legos are going woke.
Tucker Carlson did a thing about having sex with M&Ms. There is no.
He thinks the green M&M is hot.
Literally it's this idea that we're above the fray. It's not. You gotta get into the mud. You gotta meet people, and sometimes you gotta have stupid fights. You gotta have to fight over the litter box.
Where do you want to get dirty? Where do you want to get in the mud on? What's one topic that you really feel like the Democrats are hanging the party out to dry on, and they're not engaging the right enough in the details on?
Right now, the obvious answer is trans people. It is the thing is, it's so, the data is so far on our side. Not even talking whether they exist or we have the right healthcare for them or anything. Literally, the polling data is that the American people don't give a shit about them as much as the right wing pretends they do. And we saw that in the election. That's the obvious answer. The better answer would be to just take whatever fight is coming for them and literally just offer a policy position. This is the perfect, I said this again, and I've said this every year of the Biden administration. The answer is just call them on literally any of their shit. It's if they have any policy thing, propose a policy. Say, all right, here's an idea of how to fix this thing that you said is a problem. Put your money where your mouth is. Put a point to where these things are. I think he should absolutely advocate for reauthorizing the childhood tax credit. That should be number one. Just flat out bring it up for a vote. Have the Senate pass it. Let the Senate pass it. They can do that, and then the House will kill it, and then that will show that you have to engage in the policy, and really, this is the most frustrating thing to me. And I know there's not a lot of them, but can we get a left-wing billionaire to build a old Twitter where we can have some messaging better than, or I understand that the idea of a left-wing billionaire is antithetical to its existence.
George Soros.
It's literally not. like this is the other thing. Like the George Soros stuff is, and this is kind of why I want to Josh Shapiro to run for president. He's the Jewish governor of Pennsylvania. They're gonna call him. They're just gonna call him a slur just right on television. Just straight up do it, and it's like that'll be the end of their. I mean, their ideology of like that we're pro-Jewish people, but it's like literally just one billionaire to help some type of ability to build a network. Like it's really the messaging. We don't have shit for messaging. Like we have a billion leftist panels, but there's no equivalent to the fact that Steven Crowder got offered $50 million to dress up in blackface by the Daily Wire. Like we don't have any equivalent for that.
Do you mind if we wrap it up then? I got one last question for everyone.
One last question. Then we'll finish it up from there.
I'd love to hear everyone's perspective on what's one thing the left can do to advance their goals.
Stop playing defense for the right is what I would say. Aggressively
general
purge.
Consciousness to arm trans people. I'm going wild. Let's do it. Let's really talk about it. Nah, I already said it before. I'm the side of that meme where it's like, and I really mean the left needs to like, yo, post already happened, like post already happened. Like Michigan already happened. Like all this, like we gotta make sure we try to catch them. They was already shooting out power generators. Everybody's talking about it's a grand old conspiracy. What if it's these motherfuckers doing it? They the ones that been doing this shit. Like, okay, so who's probably the least protected class right now? I don't know. The one where it's cool to legislate things based around the vague point that they're trying to make. Okay, yeah, we gotta Black Panther that up. We got a Black Panther. Because at the end of the day, I'm not, and this is just me personally. I'm not going to sit here if I ever gain an audience, if I don't, whatever. I still can't sit here and reasonably say, oh, I really did nobody spoke up for them. Like, nah, we speaking up now. What's up? Like, I'm at that point because, like, I will tell everyone the same story. I've had a lot of people die over the last 2 years. Like a lot of people not believing in this, not believing in that. The mental got to them, situations. They're like, I done seen it all. At this point, it's about, okay, what is the thing that we can do to protect the most marginalized, and we'll move up from there.
Well said. What do you say,
about
Sass?
Totally down for that. And excuse me for basically plugging the same shit again. But in my experience, most people who in this country who identify as leftists tend to be much more politically informed than people who identify otherwise. And on most every issue except for voting method reform, and there's a lot of leftists out there advocating for ranked choice voting, which is a really, really terrible voting method that is not going to improve our situation at all. And so, like, on that one policy issue, they need to get fucking informed because there's a ton of misinformation that they've been falling for, and they need to fucking learn about it. So that's all I got. If you want to learn more, hit me up. I can direct you to the right resources.
Oh yeah, revolution.
Unrelentingly educating their peers. The burden of the revolutionary is to bring about the truth, no matter how exhausting it is. The only reason we fall for their tricks is because we don't see them as such. That's it.
I personally think that the one thing that the left, well, the Democratic Party can do, or the progressive part of the party, is to start holding themselves accountable. So, like, how about firing Merrick Garland so that we start to see some movement with the Justice Department? Or how about, dealing with the insider trading in Congress? And, one of the biggest, stop giving the Republicans talking points about Nancy Pelosi and all of them being fucking inside traders. I mean, you're handing the Republicans talking points by not holding your own people hold Biden accountable for his fucking failures.
Yeah,
Like,
stop being fucking hypocrites.
yeah, like whatever. So it's okay to admit that you are a human, and your party is made up of humans, and you make mistakes and you correct those and move on. Who else? Fresh?
Jezi, fresh
Jezi?
faces. Yeah, you want to say something?
Jezi, you can go. I'm not gonna finish.
All right, I put mine in the chat. Besides lessening infighting and become just a better base of understanding as a whole, because we have so many varying opinions that it's hard to get across what needs to happen. We've really come up with a couple different ways of approaching this with people, and I think Rev did a really great job of kind of talking about that already. But people really need to understand that we can support each other outside of this system, and to work and hone our skills as people and what we can do for each other. We're talking about such a big picture, and I'm such a person that looks at the people like directly around me, you know?
Mutual aid and direct action. We got this. Fresh faces.
I was gonna say the infighting thing, like especially on Twitter, is dumb as fuck. Like, we don't have a lot of power, but let's not argue over
You fucking tanky.
whatever the fucking dumbest shit is the week is. Anyway, but no, like,
Perpetually online leftists.
First off, no, it's not anymore. But like the real thing is take the fight like to them, call them on their bullshit, both sides. This is not a difficult fight. It's very, very frustrating that the people that we are fighting essentially to a standstill are dumb as shit. Literally bring Marjorie Taylor Greene point by point. Everything she says is dumb as fuck. She should be the standard bearer for the party, because that person should be institutionalized rather than empowered. And it is very easy. Every single time they have a complaint, you bring up legislation that you fight it, or you point out where they're going wrong on this. This isn't hard. They are really dumb. It just they activate to the lowest common denominator. It should not be difficult to even moderately improve people's lives in order to wave them out so that we can massively improve people's lives. And yeah, maybe I have a little bit more faith in the system than people here, but I do not think it should be that difficult to have like 4 fucking people who know how to have a conversation, and then they're the standard bearers to lead us out of this stupid ass era of the dumbest fucking people being the impediment to actual policies that can help people.
Then Alexis, do you have anything you want to say?
I think that Democrats specifically need to stop using identity politics to try to win elections. That's like a really big thing that I think.
Yeah, that's really annoying. We just need more women in the military. We just need more female drone strike pilots.
I'm sorry, the they then army in Ukraine is winning.
My favorite term is woke imperialism. Well, that's pretty much it, unless anybody else has any final thoughts. We did plugs. Yeah, equal opportunity oppression. Yeah, that's a good one too.
Just wanted to say that even if we had differences or disagreements, that I love you all and that you all are wonderful, kind, and intelligent people. Please do not ever feel as though you don't have a voice, you're not empowered. You are all the agents of change we need in the world.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a great way of sending us off. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, anytime. I'll be happy to have you guys on for a future panel. Hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Peace.
Thanks, everyone.